Hi, and welcome to another demo. And in this demo, we will demonstrate how to install and configure an ldap server, in particular an open source version of it called OpenLDAP. And yeah, let's go through the license first. LDAP stands for Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, and it's actually derived from an old protocol called X.500 Directory Services. It is an international standard developed by the IETF, Engineering Task Force. It uses TCP/IP, and as I said, it's open source implementation. There are several, but the one that we will be using for this demo is the open source implementation called OpenLDAP. All right. As we will be using Ubuntu for all our lab assignments, the repository of Ubuntu contains OpenLDAP server that we can install immediately through apt or apt-get. But they don't name it OpenLDAP, they call it slapd. For that purpose, we will be installing slapd. In addition, we will need some tools called ldap utilities that help us in managing the ldap server, for example, querying it or eventually configuring it by using a particular format of file that ldap uses. All right. For this demo, we will be using the password PAGH3377 for the admin account. Now let's start installing the needed packages, in particular slapd and ldap utils. Great. They're downloaded, and the installation process will ask us for the admin password. We'll provide the admin password, PAGH3377. Again, PAGH3377. All right, the installation process is finished. Good. LDAP has gone through several versions, but it's starting from version 2. It can use the old style of configuration, which was normal text file, normal Linux text file configuration under etc slapd slap.conf, but it doesn't use that anymore. It also uses unless you want to use that file, which we will not do that. We will use the convention that OpenLDAP version 2 recommends, which is the LDAP database itself, and the configuration files will be held by the LDAP database itself. That's a bit weird, but yeah, that's how they function. It's not a text file, but it's stored within the database itself. So let's query the database, because we just installed, but we don't have anything in there other than the default schemas that it comes with. Schemas are similar to normal relational databases such as SQL, MySQL, and so on, where you need to have the database structure is specified. For example, the fields in the database and the kind of value that they have. It's similar. LDAP uses something similar. It uses schemas that are well defined, that come as a standard with the LDAP server, and we can extend those, as we will see later on, to actually contain other types of schemas as well. But let's continue. When we install our initial installation process, it only asks us for the admin password, nothing else. All right. For that matter, we need to configure what's called a suffix, which means the top object class. LDAP works as a hierarchy. You have the top. Usually, we use the domain name of our company and so on, and then we build a tree of organizational units and so on. Within the organizational units, we have our distinguished organizational units and our distinguished names or common names for whatever we populate into those organizational units. All right, we will use our suffix dave3610.com, which is the course name, which is our course name. We will use that. All right, the domain is not registered, but we will use that. So let's reconfigure the ldap server, in this case slapd. It will ask us some questions. Do you want to omit the... We will just choose no, which is the default in this case. But here is where we need to populate our domain, our suffix. 3610.com. And again, our organization's name, which is 3610.com. Oh, have to have it correctly, otherwise it will. And the admin password, which is PHEH3377. Again, PHEH3377. You need to provide the admin password so that it can write into the database. Remove when it's purged, yes. I wouldn't do that on a production server, but in this case, it's a demo server. What we need is when we remove the package slapd, we want the database to be removed out, so to be purged. But in a production environment, I won't be doing that. All right, move the old database, yes. All right, we're done. Now that we configured the suffix, let's query it. And see what we get. Yes, we get our the top object class, which is domain component dave3610 domain component com, which reflects our domain dave3610.com. All right, great. It seems that the database is now populated with our suffix, our domain. The next thing we need to do is tell the ldap database how our organization is categorized. For that purpose, we will be using organizational units. Organizational units is how we basically build the tree, the hierarchy, so that let's say, for example, that we have a company and our company is called dave3610.com, and within that company we have different departments. We have the Department of Finance, Department of Human Resources, HR, Department of Engineering, and so on. So we might create organizational unit for each department where we put the resources such as users and so on in there. All right. So for managing, for example, users and groups, we need an organizational unit for the users and organizational units for the groups. This basically simulates a normal Unix account where we have the etc password file and the etc group file, something similar. All right. So ldap uses a format called ldif, and we need to create a file and follow a particular format in order for ldap to understand it, so that we can populate the database for it. Okay. Instead of writing the file, we will download it from a public repository that we created for the course, GitHub repository that is available to all the students and everybody. It's public, and it contains all the ldap files that we will need. In this particular case, we will download the base ldap file in order to create the organizational units, people and organizational unit groups. Okay, let's download it. And let's check its content. There we see that's the format I'm talking about. That's how we should write it in a ldif file, creating a distinguished name for the organizational unit people and creating a distinguished name for organizational unit groups. All right. Now that we have this file, we can add that information into the database by using the ldap utilities, in particular the ldap add command. All right, let's do that. And this command says here, common name admin. We'll be using the admin user for the domain component dave3610 and the domain component com, which means basically the domain dave3610.com. -w means prompt me for the password, because we don't want to provide the password on the command line in the plain text. So, and it says use this ldif file. All right. All right. You have to provide the admin password, PAGH3377. All right. Well, it's good. So far, so good. It added the organizational units as we specified. All right. Now let's query the database and see what we get back. We should see the organizational units in there. Yep. This is the top domain component, and these are the organizational units. So we're building the hierarchy, right? Great. We can now use another ldif file to create the users as well, but that's a little bit cumbersome. You see, we see the format, how it needs a particular format, and if we make some mistakes there, we might get some errors and so on. For that particular reasons, the open source community has created, you know, some good tools. Among other things, a graphical user interface, a web application called PHP ldap admin, or you know, a command line scripts called ldap scripts. Since we will be using for this demo, we will be using the command line scripts. But I really highly recommend also PHP ldap admin, which is a good software to manage ldap server. All right, but in this demo, as I said, we'll be using the ldap scripts, and so let's install the ldap scripts. It's just straightforward. It's in the Ubuntu repository, so we can use apt install ldap scripts. Great. Once ldap script installed, ldap scripts have to be configured. It has to know, you know, how to manage the ldap database. It has to know what's the who's the admin and the password for the admin, and what is the which domain, you know, the DC domain components and organizational units and so on. It uses a configuration file under etc ldap scripts. This comes pre-populated with, you know, and some of it's commented out, but we won't be using that. What we'll do, we'll take a backup of that file, and we will download our own again from our GitHub repository and use that instead. So let's take a backup of the ldap scripts that came with the installation procedure, and let's get our own ldapscripts.com file from the GitHub repository, and let's copy that into the etc ldapscripts.com file. All right. Now we can check its content as well, and let's see what it contains. See, this is, it says where the server is, since the server is on our local host. Yes, what the suffix is. This is the DC, our DC, and the organizational units. When creating groups, what group ID to start with if you do not specify. What user ID to start with if you do not specify. Password, and the password are generated automatically through password pwgen that's installed. We installed ldap scripts as well, and so on and so on. So, and this will give the possibility to use these commands to modify or to add and so on, or to delete and so on. So that's a template which you can also download. It's available on the GitHub repository. All right, great. Let's continue. ldap scripts, if you've seen the configuration file, it uses, it specifies another file called ldapscripts.password, where it gets the admin password from, because we don't write the admin password within the ldap scripts file, which is readable by everybody. What we need to do that, we need to populate that file with the admin password. And we need to do it in a special way so that there is no trailing character return or trailing new line, right? We do that by using the echo command with the -n. Basically, -n tells it that, hey, put this value into this file, okay, but remove any trailing new lines or retain carriage. That's what it does, all right? Once we have the password into that file, we have to make sure usually that it's owned by the root user, but also it's only it only has read permission. So we'll do the read permission. We'll not do the root anything because this is a demo. But we'll change it to only read for the user by using the command change mode 400. Okay, we're done with that. Now comes the schemas that I've been talking about in a form of called object classes. It comes up with default ones, but the default ones are usually not enough, and we need, some of the schemas, some of the attributes of the schemas are mandatory, some are optional, but ldap scripts, for example, uses the minimum required schemas for a user account. And in a Unix environment, which is POSIX compliant, it uses the object class POSIX account, which is basically the account, the password, and so on, and the object class shadow, which basically is similar to etc shadow file. So ldap scripts come with this, and this requires this exactly in order for it to be able to create Unix-like user accounts. The ldap scripts also give us the possibility to extend, this object classes. Let me just move it a bit. Sorry, let me just move it a bit. Called init org person, which contains a bit more. Okay. It will give us the possibility, for example, to let me just move it here. It will give us the possibility to add, for example, an attribute such as an email and other attributes as well. Okay. All right. So we'll download this. It does that through something called an ldap user template file. We'll download our own template file from our GitHub repository, and use that. Right? Let's see what it contains. These are for example, it can give us more information, not only the user ID and the password, but it can give us more, like the home directory, the login shell, for example, and mail. In this case, we're interested in the email. So these are the object classes. ldap scripts comes with POSIX and shadow account, but we're extending it, saying that we need also init the org person object class, so that we can add a mail attribute as well. This is not needed, but we're just showing in this demo that it is also possible to extend the schema. Okay, let's copy this file into the proper place. Okay, and let me just move myself up again. Sorry. So we can now, this is where we, we did all the configuration, But the most important thing is here is be able to create users and groups. So now let's create the first user and specify the group ID as well. If you don't do that, it will automatically be assigned a group ID of 10,000. But we will specify our own and say we want the group sysadmins, create group sysadmin for us with a group ID of 6,000. It has been created successfully. All right, now let's query the database and see what we get back. See, now in addition to the OUs, we're building the hierarchy, and under the OU groups, we see we have the group called sysadmins with group ID number 6,000. You see, we're building the hierarchy, right? Great. Now we have the group. Now we can also create a user that belongs to that group, the group sysadmin. Let's do that by using ldap add user, ldap1 sysadmin. Successfully, the user ldap1 was added to the group sysadmins. Now again, we'll query and see what we get. We should see the user. Yes, now we have the distinguishment user ID ldap1 that belongs to the OU people, and given name, display name, username, user ID. Because we haven't specified the user ID, it gets automatically assigned 6,000, but it says it belongs to the group ID 6,000, and it tells us the home directory is home ldap1, and the shell to use is bin bash, and this is the email address. So we successfully created a user in ldap database. Great. So ldap scripts generates a random password and puts it into a file under var log called ldap scripts password.log. All right. In order to get the password for the user, we can check that file, and that file is actually protected. You have to be root to be able to access that file. So here it tells us that the user was given the password, this password. This password, we'll be using it in, let me copy it. We'll be using it later on when we want to, when we configure the client, so that we can log in to our client machine using using this username and a password. All right, great. So far so good. ldap scripts offers a lot of useful commands. You can explore it by yourself, but we won't be needing them a lot for doing the assignments, but you can explore them. All right. Now that ldap server is ready to be used, the next step is actually to configure an ldap client to use it. And in another demo, in the next demo, we will show how to configure an ldap client that gets its users from the ldap server. This concludes the demo. Great. Bye-bye. See you on the next demo.